Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show tonight. It is Tuesday evening, and the Seahawks played a game a handful of days ago, but we still got to digest it. We got to talk about it. We got to figure this one out. I think most people have kind of made their peace with that game. That game's kind of in the rear view mirror for a lot of Seahawks fans, but it's not over until Brendan and Brandon break it down. So I am joined here by Brandon of the Hawks Nest. How you doing tonight?
Well, it's definitely getting into the morning stages of the season a little bit. I was going to wear all black today, Brendan, but I forgo that. But nonetheless, it's great to be able to still talk this over. And we've got some good things, even within the bad, which is nice. It's not just purely that.
Right. Okay. So, obviously, the main topic of discussion today will be the Cowboys Seahawks game of last Thursday night. There's really not been any super significant Seahawks news in the last couple of days, honestly. We haven't even gotten concrete updates about Jordan Brooks or Charbonnet's injuries. I haven't heard anything new about Ken Walker. So I can't really think of too much to say in terms of things outside just the game itself.
Yeah, agreed. We don't really know what's going much down with that stuff. And it's not really, I mean, it is important, but of course not the most important thing at the moment, probably.
Yeah, about the only thing that need be said about Seahawks related news is Sunday was kind of a death knell with the teams that won and the teams that lost. And in terms of this team making the playoffs, the odds went straight down into the trash can, even more so than our own game. I think we were kind of undone by the results on Sunday.
Yeah, it didn't work in our favor. The late season has not been breaking our way. If it was a ball bouncing, it would bounce as a fumble back into the arms of the guy that fumbled it on the opposition.
Right. So, with that being said, you good with just swinging right into this Cowboys game and putting a little bit of a bow on it?
Yeah, I think it's like you said, we got to do it. Let's drive in on it.
So, this game, which ended up being a really good game, objectively speaking, even though 20 combined penalties did everything it could to make it unwatchable, it was actually a very watchable game. It was probably the best Thursday night football game of the year across the entire NFL, I would say.
Yeah, from an excitement value, yeah, I think they got their money's worth. If you're tuning in, more normally those Thursday night games can be avert your eyes.
But the Seahawks could not come out on top, and this was their chance. This was their chance in this stretch of really tough games to score a win. This was the opportunity. Dallas's defense just didn't have it. You got career games, some of the best football we've ever seen played by a couple of players on this team. There was a lot of positive stuff to take away, and believe me, we will get into that. We don't want this whole show to just be everything's awful, because the big picture is awful. But there was some nice stuff out there that, as a Seahawks fan, I do take some degree of encouragement out of. There is some stuff here that made me feel a little bit good, even for a little bit.
Yeah, there were some plus sides to it and what we saw.
So let's start with the offense, because that's obviously the side of the ball with some stuff that we can actually feel good about, some stuff that's encouraging. So the Seahawks scored 35 points in Dallas on a healthy Cowboys defense, except for Trayvon Diggs. Like, they had Micah Parsons, they had Darren Bland, they had Odigizua, they had DeMarcus Lawrence, they had their crew, except for Van Der Esch, maybe. And honestly, I think Van Der Esch's backups are better than Van Der Esch at this point. So I think that's addition by subtraction. And yet, Geno Smith goes out there and looks like early 2022 Geno Smith. Just some of the best football he's ever played. And obviously, coming out of that game, a big topic of conversation was surrounding Geno Smith. So, do you take anything away from that game, or do you just feel like it's just the random good game that he's going to have, and then he's going to go back to what he was against a team like the 49ers? Like, what are you taking away from that?
No, I don't definitely find myself in the latter camp. I would drift more to the former, I would say. I think that when I look at this game, and I think the telecast did a fantastic job of showing the statistics, I think, into the third quarter of where Geno's pass protection had been at in the Cowboy game, how quick guys like Micah Parsons were creating their pressure off the snap. And it was showing you that what Geno was doing then was with really fast decision making, because he had to. If he had held it for a fraction of a second longer, he'd be under duress and getting hit. He's played the majority of this season with somewhere between, I would say, the 28th and 31st best pass protection unit in the sport. And it doesn't matter whether it's Geno Smith, of any quarter, Patrick Mahomes, I would say it would get highly impacted in the same way if it was to this degree, having your pass pro just not hold up. And while there were some guys, like people will say, well, Lucas came back and was better. Yes. But the overall stats were that I think they had well over 54% of his dropbacks in Sunday night's game. He was under quick pressure.
54 and a half.
Right. 54 and a half. And that's pressure under 2.5 seconds. So this isn't simply like it's Geno holding the pocket and just sitting there tapping the ball and patting it like a baby, trying to burp it. No, that's him having to hit the foot and then still going out there and being as productive as he was, making some really good throws and showing off, I think, really great decision-making, aside from the DaRon Bland play, which I'm just sitting there, Brendan, going, we talked about this. We talked about this on Thursday, Brendan. I thought we covered this. No out routes to DaRon Bland, right? Isn't that what we said?
Yeah, especially not to Tyler Lockett, who at this phase in his career is not really the guy I want running a lot of out routes.
Yeah.
I don't think he did a very good job on that route, but I think the problem goes above that to who is the play caller who's putting Lockett in that situation more than anything.
Yeah, I would agree there. And that was the one thing, but aside from that, everything else was on money. Things drifted back at the end of the game. But again, I will always say on this stuff, if you're expecting a position for a guy to be perfect on a game, and that if he's not perfect, then he's the reason you lost, you're probably not looking on the right reasons for why you lost. And Geno, to me, played really well. And it'd be one thing if he was doing it sitting back there with 3.5 seconds of time in the pocket. But when he is doing it under that much duress and still being so productive, and he's doing it again with another week, we got to say this because it's worth saying, another week where we're not able to open up any holes in the running game. So again, you have the nasty combination of bad pass pro and no running game. And now it's on the quarterback to carry the day. So I think that's why I say I'm in the more former on this, and that we have to celebrate this kind of day. You can be anti-Geno and say, I still want to have him draft a quarterback. It's not me trying to overstate this this is how he is the answer. He is the promised one. I'm not trying to say that either. I'm just saying that from the standpoint of he's had a lot of these really good games where he's excelled despite what's happening around him. And that's a part that I think remains absent in a lot of people's, their determination of Geno and what he is and who he is. They never kind of factor that or take into account. In my history of dealing with them on my channel in the comment section, it just seems like that gets no regard, and it really should, because not every quarterback in this sport's having to deal with, maybe they're dealing with one of those things, maybe bad pass pro, but a good running game, or a good running game, bad pass pro, but miserable pass pro and a running game that can't create any holes in it, as well as limited by its basic functionality. That's how you get there, I think.
Yeah. I mean, this week is proof, I think, that for some people, Geno Smith just can't win. He literally led the NFL in QBR this week. His QBR of 91.2 led the way. Mm-hmm. And of course, first of all, it's just criminal. You can't win that game. It's a joke that you can't win that game when your quarterback has that kind of a QBR. But it also just highlights that, some people are just never really going to come around on him. And obviously he's not an elite quarterback or a great quarterback, but I know we can win with him. And I know that he can be a good quarterback. And you saw some of that on Thursday night. And as one of the Seahawks fans on YouTube that always stands by Geno, that has generally defended Geno over the last year plus, I look at that game and I go, this is why I'm totally fine with him being our starter next year. This is why I'm completely on board with that, if that's the direction we go. And I'm pretty confident that's going to be the direction we go, by the way.
Yeah. And I think it's a fair place to go and direction to go. I think it doesn't preclude you from drafting somebody that you can have waiting in the wings. And that's where I've always said that no matter where you stand on Geno, we all can come to this well and drink from these waters, because we can find common ground here. But the front part of this still does remain true, even if there are people that are reticent to want to embrace this. And it is not just a thing to overstate. A guy doesn't have good pass protection for a long period of time. This is going back since about week 13 of last year onwards through this season, where that's consistently and remains so. We're not talking about one game here and one game there. I can pick one game here and one game there that you actually pass protected at least even like a league average level. It's to that kind of extreme of a degree. And it doesn't matter for those folks that are, clamoring for the rookie quarterback and all that. If they don't address this problem here, it doesn't matter what rookie quarterback you bring in here. It doesn't matter how high they are drafted. They're going to get broken. And if you think that that's just, an issue now of the moment that they've learned their ways, what was the big problem a lot of the pro Russell Wilson folks had with Wilson, especially at the end? A common ground argument that they absolutely had validity on. I still don't think there was other things that they were ignoring on Wilson there were things that were why we had to move forward and move on. But the thing that they always were right about, and they had a good point on, was that you had never built a really great pass protecting offensive line for Russell Wilson. You always went to the bottom low end barrel and expected to get by with it. And he would, be Magic Man or get crushed and be Magic Man. And that's not really what we should be continuing to do in the future. So if it happened in the past, it's happening right now. It doesn't get fixed in the future until we kind of go, look, we got to get this line going here,
Yeah, I mean, this year it kind of happened more because of injuries, right? Cross gets hurt, misses a month, and when he comes back, he's not really himself for a little bit. And we just got Lucas back. Like, things would be different if those guys were even moderately healthy this year, admittedly. But there's still work to be done. And I mean, I'm glad that Bradford looks as competent as he does. That makes it a little bit easier. I'd love to see Oluwatimi these last few games because Evan Brown's just not doing anything anymore.
Yeah.
But we're at least making some strides. But yeah, for this season, Geno has not really had much of an offensive line to work with. And I actually made a whole video about this. I think we should look at the other team's sideline for an example of how much better a quarterback can play if you start supplementing him with...
Re-say what you just said. You cut out for a second there.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, your video is starting to get a little bit choppy. I don't know if... Test. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You're good.
Okay, what I was just saying was I would consider looking at the other sideline, what the Cowboys have as an example of how much better you can get out of your quarterback when you start supporting them properly. And I actually even made a whole video about this.
Mm-hmm. It's a long theory I have too. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No. Go ahead.
It's my long held theory as well, is that the building the offensive line is a smart approach. And it's one that you've got to not merely do this kind of old school of we can just fill it out with third, fourth, fifth rounders. I agree with you that the injury thing is what's mainly stricken the core. But I think on top of it has been their approach with it. You're taking a right guard, you move him to left guard. You can see those. I know he had one good season last year in pass protection, but aside from that, Damian Lewis throughout his course of his career has not been good in pass protection. That doesn't set you well up on that side of the ball there. And you've got Haynes, who is kind of likewise in that situation, not been a fit at right guard at any point, really. And then you go $2.1 million on the center position and draft a fifth rounder. You say, look at the Cowboys, and you're right. Tyler Smith is a first-round pick. Tyron Smith has played in this game a long period of time, but I think he's a top 15 first-round pick. Zach Martin is a first-round pick. You see them building that line up and committing to that in that way, and they're getting still now the results on it. And I don't know why we are kind of not moving more in that direction at times. I think we're trying to build in other things in other ways, but if you're looking for a place to adjust as we go forward, that's the place to adjust. And look at the plan even beyond that, Brendan, because you have those guys at the front starting, and then you add maybe what Oluwatimi could fit in. We'll see what he is back there. But then you knew with Bradford, if he came in, his upside was going to be great pro run blocker, struggles in pass protection because of his rawness. And then at your left guard position, who was your backup plan there? Phil Haynes, then move Bradford over. So you didn't even know, you've taken care of business maybe on the pillar edges, but on the inside, you really went kind of as light as you could. And then you didn't build a lot of depth with the front end. And so a little bit, this is, you can see this kind of coming a bit. Again, going back to the fact that this goes back to the Russell Wilson era. It was the one time you really invested in this offensive line. It's the stat I love to bring up, Brendan, is that when Wilson came in the door, his first season, he had the highest paid offensive line in the NFL. Now, we don't have to make it, we don't have to go back and spend, Scrooge McDuck money out there, whatever. You don't have to go that, but it's draft picks or money, one of the two. Because going the route of fourth, fifth round picks, third round picks probably is not going to be the way to get this done.
Yeah, I think Haynes was just like, we were hoping we could buy a little bit of time for Bradford to acclimate to the NFL. and it didn't work. We were like, okay, we have familiarity with this guy. He's been pretty good for us before. I'll tell you, though, I still feel like the best version of Phil Haynes is rookie Phil Haynes. Like that Packers playoff game, he was good. And I feel like somehow he regressed after his rookie season, which should never happen.
There's two things that I don't agree with the Carroll's philosophy that are not just something merely that I disagree with, but there'd be a lot of offensive line coaches in this league that I think would also disagree with Carroll on. And that is that his penchant to move offensive linemen all around the place, and then also his penchant for rotating offensive linemen throughout the course of the game, even when they're not injured. I think those are two different particular places that offensive line coaches in particular would say that's kind of outside of the norm.
Right. And yeah, just overall, I can't believe how well Geno Smith played, because I got to be honest, other than a few other guys that we will get to, I don't think he got supported that well in this game even. Like, I don't think the offensive line played very well. I thought the play calling was better, but I'm still not convinced it was good. I don't think we made some kind of eureka breakthrough. Again, it was better. It has to be. But I still look at those two elements of this offense and I'm like, man, how did Geno do this? How did Metcalf do this? How did JSN do this? It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's what it is. Why I won a lot. I'm glad you're leading with Geno off the top, because I think that's the guy you got. Even though you got other guys that had really good days, what he accomplished going up against it. And again, it's been not just the theme of this game, but a theme of this season. It's not to completely forgive Geno of the errors and mistakes he's made along the way, but it's also to kind of explain those mistakes you see along the way. When the guy's under duress all the time, when he's getting hit on so many snaps at a high rate, it starts to build in bad habits. And then fans love to, mock a quarterback for seeing ghosts or feeling pressure that isn't there. And this is what happens, though, from kind of a human psychological standpoint when you're taking that beating as you are over and over again over time, as Geno has through now. Like I say, this isn't just a start of the year thing. If you go back to the stats, statistically speaking, right about week 13, we took a hard left turn at Albuquerque, and we ended up heading down the road of being really, really bad in pass protection and the running game just at the same time. I don't know why this has happened. Maybe it's linked to the Cross Lucas health fully, but the running back and opening the rushing lanes, our running efficiency, our run blocking efficiency, Brendan, I guarantee you is going to be right smack dab next to our pass blocking efficiency when the season ends. And they're going to be at the bottom of the barrel in the league. And that's a big driver of this offense, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I do really encourage people, and like I said, I made a whole video about this. Look at the quarterback we played on Thursday night, Dak Prescott. Like, I broke it down. 2021, Dak Prescott had a career year, like 37 touchdowns, some of the best football he's ever played. And why? Because he had Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup healthy. And then in 2022, what happens? He loses Amari Cooper. Michael Gallup is hurt almost the whole season, basically isn't worthwhile. And he only has CeeDee Lamb. So he regresses big time, to the point where by the end of that season, a lot of Cowboys fans were like, this dude's done. Get him out of here. I'm done. So what does Dallas do this year? Do they get rid of Dak and get another quarterback? No. They go, we're going to bring in Brandon Cooks, and Michael Gallup's going to be back. So we're going to have our 3 elite receivers again. We're going to continue to work on this offensive line. We're going to keep Terrence Steele. Not that that's worked out so well, but they, already had a great offensive line in place. And most importantly, they dumped their offensive coordinator, let Mike McCarthy call plays, and Dak's having another career year. He might win MVP this year. Like, Geno's the same thing. Last year, career year. This year, his numbers are way down. His performance is way down. People are like, get rid of him. Get him out of here. We're done with him. Like, I think it's easier to just fix these things around him that are clearly not going well, because I don't think there's anything with Dak that is radically better than Geno.
No, I don't think so either. And I think your point stands strong. I would lean into the playmakers / I would definitely lean into the offensive line. Is for me that chart graph with Dak Prescott, where you watch him come in the door. He's got Zach Frederick. He's got Martin in his prime. He's got Tyron Smith, right? And then he goes through that time period. And what happens is then Frederick retires. Martin starts to get beat up. Tyron Smith can't stay on the football field. Now we go a couple years further. Now you bring back in Tyler Smith. We look at him this year, and Tyron Smith's actually playing. Tyler Smith's at 22 years old, looks like a star. Zach Martin is still holding it down, and Biotish and Prince are functional for their positions. They at least have continuity going for them, which is a big part of offensive line success. Whether those guys are really, like you say, good or not, they're at least got that working for them. And that's, to me, as much of why you see then the Dak takeoff go off too, is that this offensive line, if you were to look at the performance of the offensive line for Dak Prescott in his time there, this is me hazarding a guess. Admittedly, I don't have the data in front of me, Brendan, but I bet if you took his rookie year, that'd be the high water mark, right? His pass protection, his run blocking probably all went a little bit down each year after that. I bet this year is right in line. If you took a graph, it would be right in alignment or very close to alignment what it was when his rookie year, collectively speaking. And that's why, like you said, I think the playmakers are a part of it too. You can't just rock out there with CeeDee Lamb and go make it work. But I think that's the part too, is that the line is playing at its best. And to me, again, I come back to like you do, the line is your driver. It shouldn't be the last thing you get to in the caboose of items you add to your team. It should be at the forefront of items you're trying to add to your team.
Yeah, and remember, this is all post-injury Dak Prescott, which robbed him of a lot of his mobility. Like, he is more of a statue than he ever was before. So to me, Dak is a good but very limited quarterback right now, who is kind of at the mercy of what you put around him. And what they put around him is really good. They get good results. And I'm like, if they can do it with Dak, I think we can do it with Geno. I don't think that Dak is some A-plus elite tangibles, all the tools quarterback. I don't think he has some Andrew Luck type of toolbox to work with here. And Geno's just Geno. No, I think they both actually have a lot in common.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that way more in common than they do that have this dissimilar, to your point. And I think it's a very key point here because, Brendan, these are the things we got to be concentrating on as we're looking forward on this rebuild and where it turns towards next. And the quarterback you're looking for and how much of the onus is on this thing that some fans have where you've got to get the star guy. You know, is it getting the star guy or is it getting the right supporting cast? And I come back to, like I often do, maybe to a fault, and saying what brought you success before in the franchise history. Lean into that direction of things if you can, as much as you can. And as I said, with Russell walking in the door, you'd built up an offensive line that was at least above average across the board, had that continuity in place, and allowed him to then be out there and be able to not be under just continuous duress. Certainly not 54% duress, as we've seen often with Geno throughout this year.
Right. And yeah, that's the story of Geno's game, I think, pretty much. I know it sucks he wasn't able to take it home in the fourth quarter. I know it's too bad he wasn't able to end that game on his terms. But I'll tell you, if he did, I think our defense would have just given it right back. I have a little bit of a feeling that they weren't stopping anything in any circumstance.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true.
We'll get to those guys. We will get to those guys, believe me.
Yeah, Lord have mercy.
So the other superstar of the week is DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf, one of the best games of his career. Right off the bat, boom, he's gone 73-yard touchdown pass, ball thrown over the middle. Let's remember that for later in the show. He brings in a couple of other touchdowns around the goal line, which, I mean, scoring in the red zone has been a problem for this team. So DK was able to really help out in that area. We were very good in the red zone in this game. It was kind of everything that you could want from DK Metcalf in a game, pretty much.
Yeah, it showed you what happens when you can, seek to target a guy and feature a guy in an offense where it doesn't have to always look so hard and how you're getting him looks. And certainly DK gets a lot of double teams, which makes it hard for a quarterback. And I'm not advocating for Geno to be throwing into any double teams or any QB for the Hawks to do so. But when he has those opportunities in one-on-ones and when you got an opportunity to kind of trust into that speed and lean into it, you do so. And Geno threw a great ball there on the post route to your point on that first ball. I mean, he puts a laser beam on it, and it's hard when you're putting the velocity to get the accuracy at the same point. It's much easier when you can kind of layer a ball in to kind of pinpoint it in there. And he's got to put that on a spot. At least not, he doesn't have to, but where he puts it on a spot at allows DK to then make the catch and get the yak. And that's the difference between putting it on the body of the receiver or out in front to grab it and then go. So it's a big part of DK on the catch, a big part of Geno on the throw. The slant route down at the goal line, I don't know why when we don't get down to the 4 or 5 yard line, we don't see more of that more often. I mean, maybe they feel like they're going to get the linebacker easing to DK post snap with the corner trailing, and that leads them to believe that you're just throwing in the teeth of it. But it seems like anytime they want to go to it, Brendan, the slant to DK over there it appears to be kind of open whenever they want on that play, because corners know that the fade could be coming, so they have to kind of stay on their back foot for the fade route, and then you just come underneath with a slant, and the leverage sort of naturally sets it up for you to get the win there. But DK was outstanding. He shows why a lot of us have been talking for a very long time. It's the subject that's come up this year that surprised me more than any other, which is the DK talk that comes up in my chat very often, and I see online presented at times. Sometimes because people are tired of DK, sometimes because people look at him as that functional asset that you can offset to get a lot back for, and that you can then save the money on the cap from if you were to move. But I've long said I think he is not part of the problem. He's part of the solution. And he certainly, I think, showed that to you on this Cowboys game this last Thursday night.
Yeah, I kind of feel like some Seahawks fans are just like agents of chaos. They want everything to burn because they don't like where things are going with this team right now. So they're just like, burn it all. And there's some stuff that needs to get burned. Don't get me wrong. There's some stuff that I would like to move on from, but there's got to be a few babies in this bathwater here.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good reference. So they're checking them babies out like they're going through the nursery, just like there's a fire in the building. Yeah, I get where the energy is coming from, Brendan. You know, the frustration in the Hawk fandom is as deep as I've seen in many, many, many years. And I know that's then going to kind of present itself in a variety of different ways as fans kind of seek in their own minds the solutions that they think would be best presented here to find this thing forward. So I get where the spirit is moving from the right direction, even if I don't necessarily agree with their, wanting to make that sort of a lead point on where they go. But I do get where the spirit of it comes from.
So as I think we both have been this year, especially because we've been among the more pro Geno and pro Metcalf Seahawkers on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And, after that, a game like that makes you feel pretty good about those positions. I'll say that. So even though I was obviously very unhappy that we didn't win that game, I was like, yep, that's what these guys can do. That's what these guys can do.
Nothing in this game should ever be the thing that I find over and over is there's a draw for some fans to go to the simplistic. I can blame it on the QB. He looks bad on this. That's on him. He's got to do this. This game's really complicated, and it's very rare that you can go to just one player on something and say, here, this is this guy's issue. He's the one here that made this whole thing overturn. And I think that's a thing that sometimes is missing at times in their people's assessment. It just turns into sort of, did he do it or not? And the other outside factors that lead to that being, again, there's 10 players on your team on the field. There's 11 players on the opposition's team. There's a lot of different colliding items going on in the field. You can't just drive the conclusion and result from, well, he played like crap. You can't watch that Ravens game with Geno Smith and watch him snap after snap getting hammered 1 second after hitting the back foot and not be going, man, there's nothing he can do back there. I can't hold a lot of what his performance is, whatever he does today, because the offensive line is literally letting the floodgates open on every snap, not partially, but all the way. They've dropped the levers across the board. And they're opening up, and here comes the flood. And there's nothing any quarterback could do in that situation. Not Geno, not anybody.
So those were the two stars of the show for sure. Those are the two guys who you're feeling really good about coming out of that game. A couple other players on offense definitely chipped in. JSN had maybe the best game of his career. I know he had a drop, but it ended up not counting as a drop because of the PI. Mm-hmm. But he did good. I think Noah Fant. I'd throw Noah Fant in there as well. He made a few nice catches, made some nice plays.
He did.
And I'll give Charbonnet a little bit. It wasn't a great game, but it was. He doesn't have a lot to work with. I think he's mostly doing what he can. He did have a really nice screen pass on a broken coverage, or I don't know exactly what you would call that. We caught Dallas with their pants down basically at the end of the quarter. I gotta say though, I kind of feel like that's about it. So that's still a lot of players on offense that I'm looking at, and I'm wondering, like, how did we get to 35 points in Dallas with our offensive line playing like this, with Tyler Lockett playing like this? I'm sorry, I got to call him out. I know there's a little bit of sacred cow stuff going on with Lockett in this fandom too, but Lockett didn't play well. We didn't use our tight ends that much overall in this game. Like, it was a very weird thing where I still came away from this game feeling like only 5 or 6 players on this whole team really played well. And yet there we were with Dallas in the final minutes with a chance to win. It was crazy.
It was. Also, just another just kind of mind-bending stat on this from this game, Brendan, is all of the scoring drives in the game, we started from our own 25-yard line. There was no short fields that you worked from, so you can't, well, the defense got a turnover and you're at the 5-yard line, you just punched it in. And like you had to go the whole field every single time. And it is a testament, again, comes back to, I know we seem like we're overstating, but that's just why this is such a telling point of what Geno did, is that the line wasn't really doing much up front, certainly nothing in the run blocking game. And I did like the way Waldron called it through most of the game. I think he kind of definitely went in the tank into the fourth quarter on the back couple of drives. But Geno was outstanding, man. And DK was great. And what he did showed you why he can be the game-changing talent that he is and why we haven't used him to his max. And you know why, if you're looking to move out of town, you very well could be moving a guy out of town who goes out and becomes even more prolific than he's been, because your team just didn't figure out the way to use him right. And I never like to move on from a guy if that's the reasoning. If it's one thing, it's a malcontent or somebody that's asking to leave town, or you've got their best days are over with. But as DK showed in this game, a Megatron-like performance, that's certainly what he can do. So yeah, it's amazing they did what they did. I think they understood how to attack this Cowboys defense. They went at DaRon Bland in single coverage early on, of course, and the Cowboys tried to trust DaRon over there on DK, and then they got freaked out. In the second half, they had Stephon Gilmore travel with them, but we hammered them on those big plays. And like you said, some guys, Noah Fant made a couple of acrobat catches, I think, in this game. He's another guy, we're not able to utilize him, it feels like, to the fullest of what he could provide. But yeah, other than that, not a lot of other guys you could really go to and say how this guy did great or that. Like you said, Charbonnet was kind of just okay.
Yeah, like the offensive line, I guess PFF gave Damian Lewis a really good grade. He was one of our highest graded players on offense. Other than that, they were not very kind to our offensive line. Lucas and Peters in particular got murdered by PFF, which, I'm not here to jump on Lucas. It's his first game back in 3 months, and he's dealing with Micah Parsons. And, Cross didn't play a very good game, but he's dealing with DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons and Odighizuwa over there. I'm not slamming these guys, just saying it was a game where we put up 35 points in spite of the offensive line.
Yeah. And what happens if you can get those elements in front of Geno right? For all the naysayers of Geno, if we can provide him an offensive line that it can actually hold up and do the inverse of what they provided for Thursday, and we're putting 35 up, what is that offense capable at that point if you're giving him that? And it's the question we will be, I'm sure, turning over this offseason. But for those that say it's just the QB, I go, we need to get that part right first and foremost, whether you trust Geno or not.
Let's talk a little bit about Tyler Lockett then, I guess. I think we got to go into this because after that game, there was a significant portion of my viewers on YouTube, I noticed, in comments, in Discord, in chat, talking about where are we with Lockett right now? Does he need to become wide receiver 3? Does he need to be bumped down on this pecking order? And with JSN having such a good game, is it time for us to accept that Lockett's in a different phase of his career? He's got that killer drop that may have ultimately cost us this game. I don't know, but it was a huge drop. I don't think he ran a good route on the out route. And you can see that he's just not going to be able to bring it every single play. There's going to be some plays where he doesn't get separation because he's older and slower. Obviously, there's still some stuff he's good at, but we got to figure out what we can do with Tyler Lockett while he's here. How do you view it?
Well, did we all of a sudden overnight go from the draft night where we all understood that JSN was a slot guy and decided that he's suddenly now an outside receiver? First, let's begin the conversation there.
I don't think so. I think more people are looking at, the pecking order. Like, you can be a slot receiver and still lead your team in targets. You can still be the number 1 receiver as a slot. So I think the question is more, should we start taking targets away from Lockett in order to get the ball more to a guy like a JSN?
I'd argue they probably have already started doing that this year. I don't think that Tyler's had a lot. I mean, Tyler had any game this year where he's had a high number of targets outside of maybe one? Most of what he's done has been on pretty efficient, I think, touches. So I don't, I'm with you on is the out route the best route? No, but then that comes back to, again, for me, the root of that is that we have a predilection for running out routes. So for when you have a guy like DaRon Bland, who you and I talked about on Thursday, jumps out routes, is it Tyler's fault at that point that you're doing something that is I don't want to use a word that's I'm not allowed to use here, but not a very smart move to then go into the teeth of what a defense does well. And that's not on because here, what's my counter on this, Brendan, is that when Tyler's asked to run inside routes to the hashes, stop routes inside, in cutting routes, he'll get open because the guys are sitting on the outside out routes. But you don't run the in cutting routes and the stop routes very often. Why? Because you want to run the out routes, or you want to run the 9 routes, or you want to run the little slot over in the flat. Or lock it in the flat or whatever, that little play they run where they just have the guy stand off over there in the flat. So I think already I watched it. We'll look at the snap counts. I don't have on my computer because, I'm working, but if you can look at the PFF snaps, for instance, I think this would tell a tale of total snaps from Lockett last year versus this year. Do you have that in front of you?
I do have it in a chart. Let me pull that up real quick. I do actually am able to pull that up. But I actually think Lockett was getting a decent number of targets. No one receiver in this offense is getting a ton of targets. But last year he was 79%. This year he's actually 80. The year before he was 87. So the cut down in Lockett's snap count is actually something that started last year.
Yeah. So they're starting, and then that would have been right there because then there's a big difference the year before that, right? To your point,
the year before was 87, 89, 90. So when basically 2022 was the year he started to become a little bit more of a part-time player.
Yeah. I mean, and if you look at it too from a target angle, you got 2020s at 132 targets, 21, 107, 22, 117. Right now he's at 87. So probably on pace for right around a little over 100. And so there'll be a little bit of even a dip from last year. So is there signs of regression in Tyler? Sure. Are we able to get out from under his contract this offseason? No. So is it really worth talking about what we need to do off of it? Here's nothing. Is JSN an outside receiver? No. So does it take Tyler off the field for Jake Bobo at this point? I think I'll be more willing to go down maybe that road, or Drake Young. I'd be maybe willing to go more down that road next year. After, for instance, Bobo gets through this rookie year, I kind of like just having him in the role he's in right now. Especially because Geno and Tyler do have a good amount of chemistry. And it seems like of all him and DK not always on the same page, him and some of the other guys not, it seems like for the most part, him and Tyler tend to be on the same page in the route adjustments and stuff that they're doing on the fly. So I don't think this is the point where you do that. And I think Tyler still, unless he retires, and if he retires, is really not good for us anyway, Brendan, because then that bonus money accelerates. And then we're paying a player retired who's eating a pretty healthy chunk of the cap up at that point. So it's really all in our best interest for him to just keep going along and at least being reasonably productive. Find the JSN targets where he can with there. Find the moments you get Jake Bobo out there, for instance, in the one wide receiver sets. I love the Jake Bobo there when he's in those kind of points. And continue to reduce down the snaps, But Tyler's here for at least the next year.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I am not quite so aggressive with the narrative of Lockett is starting to get to a point where he's washed up. Obviously, he's starting to lose some of the things that he used to be able to do, but you need to find a way to use him while he's here, and the way to use him is not running out routes against Darren Bland on 3rd and 7, where I think he's the primary target on that play. I think Geno just sees it and goes with it because that's what the play is designed to do.
And he's been instructed to do. And I think if we can say that DK Metcalf's been impacted in getting him quality targets at times because of the poor pass pro, I think that we can also say that that's probably impacted Tyler too as well. And it hurts Geno, it hurts the offense, and it hurts the receivers because the receivers at times will be getting open. Maybe they're ready there on the route and instead the quarterback's got somebody right there in his face. He's got to move off the spot. He can't throw it on time like was kind of predetermined he was supposed to do.
Now, the drop is obviously not okay, and that's a huge play in this game. But at the same time, this is the same stuff we do with DK sometimes. Like, receivers are going to drop the ball sometimes. It's just part of doing business. Larry Fitzgerald dropped a couple passes every year. Like, some people seem to believe that there are receivers out there who just never drop the ball, and that doesn't happen.
And I think Tyler's had probably the worst season for drops he's had maybe in his career. And he's been so sure-handed where he's had whole seasons, I think, where maybe he's had one drop the whole year. It's probably set a standard to Tyler being, expecting that to be the thing what they see. And there's a couple moments that stand out that you can go, man, Tyler usually has that ball, but I don't think that he's dropped off a cliff or that it's some huge sway. It's probably just a matter of he is getting a little older, not quite as productive. And like Larry went into his elder part of his career and still found productivity even when he was not at his pure prime self anymore. You can do likewise similar here with Tyler.
Last thing I want to talk about with the offense would be the general overall process, the scheme, the play calling, because obviously it was better. There was some stuff I liked, but I still feel like we got a ways to go because to my recollection, Geno Smith threw the ball 41 times in this game, and I can only remember him throwing it over the middle 4 times. The touchdown to Metcalf, I consider that to be a throw over the middle, even though it's, not directly over the middle of the field. Mm-hmm. A JSN had a catch over the middle, the Lockett drop, and then the Disley play in the red zone where Geno overthrows him. Mm-hmm. So you are still running a massive percentage of your offense outside the numbers. And at the end of the game, when you need to make some plays, you need to get some quick yards, you need to convert this 3rd down, this 4th down, et cetera, nothing over the middle, really. Everything was like to the boundaries, to the sideline. Like I don't know. I still wasn't that thrilled with the way this offense was put together.
No, I had problems with it as the game went along, especially. I did like a little more of the mix. It felt like through the early part of the game. Some of it was on the big plays that you were getting, but you were also leaning into things that I wanted to see them lean into this offense and some of the throws and what they were doing. But the bigger problems do remain. You don't have an identity still yet offensively. You scored 35 points. What was your identity out of that game? I mean,
yeah, the identity is, yeah. I got nothing.
Yeah, you scored 35 points. You can't really go, well, we did, and I don't really got much. So, you still don't have that identity. You still have places and things you don't utilize. We didn't run one fly sweep in this game, Brendan. I know you don't have Eskridge because I'm sure he's been broken again because he played 5 minutes. So that's standard. That's going to happen. But you didn't go back and run to it at all, really. You didn't do a lot of, I would have tried to, if they trusted their screen game, probably run a lot more of it, considering how wild and free the Cowboys were trying to get up the field on their pass rush. I mean, they weren't worried about the run game in the least from a very early portion of this game. So you're not seeing kind of the adjustments to what you're feeling from the defense. Sometimes you can feel the pass rush coming under control, almost a mush rush, like kind of slow moving into it where they're really keeping the pocket controlled as they're closing it around the quarterback. But, like you get with the Niners or you got this past week, they're shot out of a cannon. All those guys are trying to get up the field and they're trying to attack. And so you would oftentimes, try to get that with a screen game. But I think that part of the reasons the Cowboys go to the field like that is they go, we're not scared of the run game. We know the Hawks aren't going to call the screen game enough consistently to be worried about it. You mentioned the one play they had success with it, but didn't go back to it aside from kind of the last play, whatever the hell that was.
Yeah, the last play obviously has been talked about a lot by Seahawks fans over the last 5 days. Because it's a very interesting thing to leave the best defensive player in the league unblocked. But I do see things like that across the NFL. Like I watched some of the Broncos-Texans game, and there were several plays where the Broncos would leave Will Anderson unblocked. Because sometimes that's how you deal with people like elite pass rushers. You scheme them so you don't have to worry about blocking them, which is really hard to do. And you resolve, okay, we're not going to block him, and we're going to make the play anyway. Now, I personally don't like what we did, but I'm not going to act like it's some ridiculously sacrilegious thing to come up with a play where you're trying to use his aggressiveness against him. I don't hate it. I just didn't think it was the right time for that. Not with DJ Dallas out there, who is your 3rd string running back. Like I didn't like it.
Agreed. I mean, if you're talking about that being a play you call in the 3rd quarter, even to DJ Dallas, I'd sign off on it. You talk about that being our last attempt to try to make something happen. Go to your playmakers. Mm-hmm. You're spending $7 million for a tight end. Attack him with the backup linebacker for the Cowboys, whoever's filling in for Van Der Esch. You don't like that? Go to the DK matchup on Stephon Gilmore. I know Gilmore's good, but DK sunned him up a couple of years ago with New England. Try that. You don't like that? Hit JSN out of the slot. I don't know how you go through it. You go, no, DJ Dallas. How you arrive there on a play sheet as you're going through that as a play caller in the moment like that, I don't. But again, I don't very understand very much of our offensive process. So again, I don't. You're right about the leaving the free rusher stuff is something that teams do. I will say this, Brendan. When teams usually do it, you can see the reasoning behind when they do it. And let me give you an example of this. Did you watch the 49er and Eagle game?
Most of it.
Do you remember how they were talking about Hassan Riddick and the Niners being aware of him crashing down on the run play and understanding that he's going to bite into the run fake if you leave him unblocked as a defender? You can count on that. And so what they did is they faked an inside run and came back out with Deebo Samuel. And sure enough, they did even a slow motion, kind of almost all 22 shot on the telecast, showing on the play action by Purdy, drawing Hassan in unblocked, and then going to Deebo Samuel on the fly sweep. But that's where you see the 2 points working in conjunction of either. We just left him coming unblocked to the play side right at Geno. There is no misdirection on the play. There is no like, well, are they going to maybe run it? Is it a play action? It's just a drop back pass. In fact, it looks like a screenplay to me, which if it's a screenplay and you're letting the pass rusher just upfield, that's great. But the point of that is that the guys are supposed to get at least like an arm on the guy to like kind of give him a little bit of slowdown. So it's not just a free run at the quarterback post snap. You don't block them, but you give them a little bit of a like, here you go, Mary, here you go. But it was a broken play. But the whole sequence was really beyond just the one play. It was the whole sequence of plays and a couple of drives at the end there where Waldron just kind of went gonzo mode a little bit.
And the last thing I want to say about the offense, and I noticed this especially near the end of the game, it seems like every single snap we get the play clock down to like 0.001 seconds. And that was a thing that drove us crazy a few years ago. We were hoping that it would be over with, Russ not being here anymore and Geno being here now. But I'm starting to notice it more and more. We're really flirting with that play clock. Like, who are you putting that on? Where do you think that stems from?
Well, my suspicions would be that there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen trying to come up with the play. That's my suspicion. And like you, I don't like it because a lot of what Geno does best is when he has time up at the line of scrimmage to assess what the hell's going on in front of him. And he has a fairly good read of what's going on most of the time in front of him when he gets that time. That's what that does is kind of force that up a little bit. So that's my suspicion. I don't have anything to prove it though, of course. So that's just what it would seem to me, unless Waldron's just sitting there going, it's like it's got to be one of the two, and I think it's probably like I'm going to call an 8B65. And again, going back to remember that story of, I hate drumming this back up because I've spoken about it a lot, but it's it's the fourth down and one play against the Rams in the playoffs a couple of years ago, right? Where Schottenheimer wants to call this, Coach Carroll wants that, and we end up with a delay a game penalty.
Oh yeah, I think I remember that.
I mean, I as an investigatory journalist, all I can do is take me where the event, where the trail leads, and the trail would lead me in that direction on that.
Yeah. And I think that's about all there is to say about the offense. There was some great stuff out there, but it still feels like you left some stuff out there.
Yeah, I think you still could have done more. I can't put it on them like they should have done better, but you definitely at the end, it oddly went, it sort of just went like, I don't know, we overthought ourselves or stopped just kind of keeping it in that lane where it was in the first half a bit. And again, I don't mean, they just didn't want to attack Gilmore, and that's why why'd you swing away from DK? He's having a career day at half, and you just kind of steer away then at that point. I know that they then moved Gilmore on to follow him, but then that should have been even all the more presumption to attack him, because how come you were able to deal with him in New England like that with Gilmore's? Because that's what New England would do with Gilmore too, is they'd follow him. And what that does, one of the reasons I don't like cornerbacks following receivers when you've got an elite one, is that then what it does is you can't really dictate the rest of your defense through. So if you have a double team and the guy's moving here and there and this guy's covering there, it's harder to then have the safety always looking to arch to this side. You basically just end up trusting him in one-on-one to hold up. And that's why in that New England game, DK was really able to pop off, because he can beat a little bit of an elder statesman, Stephon Gilmore, now on some of those deeper routes down the field and stuff.
Yeah, it's a very rare combo of size and speed that he has. So
yeah, hit that.
You allow him to utilize it.
Utilize it. Yeah, it's good things tend to happen.
Let's see here. Labrador Hawk, thank you for the $20 donation. Appreciate it. All
Thank
right.
you, Labrador.
I don't see a comment associated with that. If you meant to send one, say something in the chat, and I will probably be able to see it. Okay, so that was the offense. Now we have to go over to the other side where things are not nearly as good. And given the fact that we weren't exactly 100% on board with the offense, that's saying something. But you know, if Mythbusters was trying to handle the myth of whether or not the Seahawks defense is only bad because the offense never does anything, they would watch that game and then they would say that myth is busted.
Yes, they would. And it's another long suspicion on both of our parts of this defense, even in the times they're looking good, that this might be a day coming down a bit of the pike with that. It's all about around every which way you look. I don't know how much you can really take. There's certainly individual performances that we can talk about that are decent within this. But it was more of the same that we've dealt with defensively throughout the year. Trusting four-man fronts that can't get home. Soft zone defenses all day, every day, twice on Sundays. And not a lot of aggression, miserable tackling, undisciplined football across the board. But other than that, they play pretty good.
Yeah, there are a couple guys you can isolate, but it feels like such a waste of time to even do that because the product was so bad. Like I do think that Jaron Reed played pretty good. I got the impression that he had a good game. I think that Wagner played like Wagner. He does give up a little bit in coverage. He is a little bit slow, but you knew that when you signed him.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to hear about that.
Can I too? I see the thing with Wagner getting shaded at points on the Twitter with the coverage stuff. And again, this week, you know, the big play that everyone will go to is him not getting down to, you know, Brandon Cooks on a curl route, 30 yards down the field. And I really wish, and maybe I'm wrong for putting it this way. So if I'm wrong, my bad on this, but it seems to me like the conversation should be, why do we have a middle linebacker trying to cover a wide receiver 30 yards down the field instead of why can't our middle linebacker cover a wide receiver 30 yards down the field? And I don't get why that's the part that gets lost on this, because I watch a lot of NFL action, and there are times that linebackers have to get caught on receivers at times, but it's very rare that you're going to isolate your middle linebacker to ask them to do that. And I'm not sure why we are. And I've seen it over a lot of the all-22 where you're watching these plays where the curl comes around and Bobby's right there in coverage where he should be, and he's got his space. And then here comes the receiver. Now, keep in mind, they're running full speed at that point because they've had a free release because we don't press. So you have a Brandon Cooks free release. Here he goes. He's up to full speed. You have a Bobby who's got a first spot drop to the zone, flip his hips, and then catch this wide receiver who's running full speed to stay step with him, to get a hand in there, to be able to make a play on the ball, to be tight in coverage. I don't know how a middle linebacker is supposed to do that. Maybe my understanding of what they are and what they have as a skill set is still behind the ball in the 80s and 90s, and my outlook of them a little bit, and that the new modernized ones can all do that. They could all just flip their hips on a dime and run step for step with the receiver who's sorry, my internet's a little bit out tonight. It comes back and forth, folks. It's mine where I'm working on and off on a secondary setup here. Yeah. There we go. But that's my big main issue here, Brendan, is just that this is not what you should be asking Bobby to do. You're not putting him in the right circumstances to succeed. Again, a lack of blitzing. You know, last year the Rams had him up around 10%. You would have thought that they really would have taken that as the model to work off of. Instead, he's around 7%, which is not a big drop, but it's enough of a drop. Why aren't you leaning towards the 10? Why are we down at the 7% range? And another big problem with me coming out of this game is you trust in that front four and you continue to do that. They don't bear out the results, Brendan. They continually give up chunk plays, which is what supposedly the defense is supposed to be stopping in its whole foundational spot. And meanwhile, you've got some guys that can really rush the passer when you send them on the blitz. Devin Witherspoon making plays as a blitzer. Jamal Adams making plays as a blitzer. Jordan Brooks getting a sack in this game as a blitzer. You're the best stuff that you do as a team. I did a show on this yesterday, Brendan, and doing the research on it. Just when I really thought about all the games we played this year and when you've used the blitz, it's been the best stuff you've done on defense by a mile.
Yeah.
And yet you lean away from it. You do not lean into it. And it boggles my mind a little bit, especially this game where you keep trusting that front four. Frank Clark, Darrell Taylor off the edge. You go get him, boys. And they give you nothing out there. Darrell Taylor's one sack came because of Witherspoon. He didn't get the sack because he beat his man. He got beat. Literally, Tyron Smith's got him pushed out the back of the club. He's out in the back of the pocket, just oh, I got blocked on that play again. And then finally he's like, oh, look, Witherspoon flushes the quarterback back into me. Let me go get a sack. It was odd again to watch a game where they don't even try to attempt that on a day where they can't stop. You got no stops throughout the game. There's no place in that point for you to go back to your defense going, well, let's stay with the front four because it's getting us this. Let's keep rocking the front four with the pass rush because it's getting us that. It wasn't getting you anything. There was a literal zero sum that you were getting off of this. So why not try to move? And I know it's against Carroll's whole better whatever, but you didn't really stop anything. You still end up giving up 41 points with this preventative defense, with this keep it in front of you defense, with the read react, the bend but don't break. I don't know how that's not break at that point. Doesn't seem very bendy at 41 points.
Yeah, we got one stop in that game because CeeDee Lamb dropped the ball. Right?
Mm-hmm.
They had it, and then CeeDee Lamb just dropped it. That's the one stop you get. Other than that, 0 punts, 0 turnovers, which, I mean, how are you not embarrassed? Pete came out after that game, his press conference, and the first thing he says is I think we played one hell of a game tonight. I'm so proud of him. It's of what?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the talking points of Carroll coming out of the press conference, and then he got to the officials, and look, the officials were horrible, and we can talk about those too. But the issues and problems with this team seem like they're just going to be here now and remain on into the future because he will not recognize kind of where it's going awry and wrong. And it is the most frustrating part of watching this team is not that they don't find success; it's just that the failure may continue into the future because they're not realizing or acknowledging what is failing. And I hope I'm wrong about that.
So a couple of things that really stuck out to me about this defense. First of all, our highest graded player was Cameron Young, which is never a good sign. Although I do want to say, I think Cam Young, he's been better than I thought this year. I think he's okay.
Yeah, he's exceeded my expectations of what I thought he'd do when he got. He's not had a lot of opportunities, but when he's been given the chance, he's gone out there and flashed here and there.
Obviously Jordan Brooks gets hurt really early in this game, and we see a lot of Devin Bush, and I think Bush played okay, I guess. I mean, I'm not going to hold him accountable for getting thrown into an ocean of ineptitude and not being able to swim out of it. But that's a blow. That's a blow. I can acknowledge a little bit of that, and I'm worried about Jordan Brooks, to be honest. That did not look good.
I didn't feel like there was a big impactful difference between Jordan being in the game and Devin being in the game myself. Maybe from a blitz standpoint, Jordan getting the early sack, but I don't think that there was a keen difference. You weren't stopping the offense when Jordan was in the game. You weren't stopping the offense when Bush was in the game. They're both, probably that's the thing about going out and paying Jordan, for instance, 17, 18 million in the offseason. It's can you get basically that performance if that's the performance you're shooting for the position without having to spend that kind of money? Or maybe it's just a small drop off that's very hard to kind of quantify.
What else can be said about this defense? Woolen, I know he got dinged with a couple of questionable penalties, but watching this game, I kind of felt like his confidence was a little bit low. He's been doing this a lot this year where he gets beat over the top, but then he gets unbeat because he's so fast. And in this game, he would get beat and Dak would just throw it up and Woolen would end up committing a PI or what looked like a PI at least, trying to catch back up. It seemed like they were aware of the fact that Woolen is somebody who's willing to bet on his speed.
Yeah, I think that's the case. I also feel like a little bit on one of those plays, he didn't really go with the supreme amount of effort off the snap to run with the man. And maybe I don't think it was much of, I've seen in the past him do that where you can feel him baiting the quarterback to do it. It didn't feel like he was baiting there. It felt like more like he had predetermined Dak wouldn't try to throw the ball his way to this guy in that moment over the top. And so he kind of lollygagged a little bit on the play, trusting the fact he could pick the speed back up. And that's different than baiting where you're trying to set the hook. That's more of your lolly. You're just kind of trotting your way up the field. It's been an up and down second season for Reek. The sophomore slump is sometimes a real thing for certain players, and he seems to be kind of going through it this year. We don't know what the health is in the shoulder right now. I think he's wearing the brace, and it's certainly not at 100%. Probably going to require surgery in the offseason. He's had moments he's looked good too, though. And I think that long-term he'll be fine. This wasn't maybe his best, best of games. He made a couple of plays as well on the ball at times. So it wasn't all completely bad for him, but certainly it's been a bit of a struggle, him refinding that same footing he had last year.
Yeah. Witherspoon, I think, played okay. It might've been his worst game of the year, which is more an indictment of how good he's been than anything else. Like, if that's your worst game as a rookie, then you're pretty awesome.
Yeah, he especially got picked on early on in this game. I think he had 4 or 5 catches in the first half alone. You could attribute it to him. And he definitely, struggled to hold up against CD Lamb at times. So like you said, I think it's probably one of his rougher games of the year that he's had. And he still came back, I thought, in the second half and played really good, though. So he did come back in that second half and made some flash moments and kind of made a little bit up for it. I will say, like you say, with Jaron Reed, Bobby Wagner, and Witherspoon, to me, maybe even Trey Brown to a degree, are guys that, I feel like are giving it all this season when I watch these games. I don't know if I can say that where I feel like everybody's giving that max supreme all-out effort. I think those guys are. I think they're laying it on the line. And Reed, you see him, I think, doing that every week. But I don't know if that same kind of intensity is coming across the board necessarily.
Yeah. I think Leonard's been really good since he got here, too. It seems like he shows up positively in every game.
Yeah, agreed.
One thing that really stood out to me in this game, Frank Clark played 29 snaps on defense. Derek Hall played 4. 4 in a game where we had 89 snaps total on defense. So there was plenty of opportunity to play everybody a lot. And you decided you'd rather play Dre'Mont Jones 60 plus snaps all over the place and just exhaust him than give Derek Hall any kind of burn at all. Like, what's going on here? This was almost a first round pick.
Another guy where there's either one of two things. He is supremely far behind in his development process, or he is dealing with that shoulder injury. I know it's another shoulder thing, but it's a shoulder thing he's been dealing with throughout the season, according to Carroll. So I don't know if that's why they're trying to protect him from it, going, look, he can play if he needs to get out there, but he can't play. He's nowhere near 100% if we got to put him out there. And that's the only reason I can go to that they're doing it, because Brendan Taylor and Clark, both of them, say nothing for Dre'Mont Jones, are not like doing anything that's really highly productive off of that edge. You're not really stopping altogether the run that well. You're not creating any pressure. So it does come down to a point of like, even if he was bad at this point, but you're hoping he can grow, you just get him some snaps in there versus, he'll give you a flash or two here. And that doesn't seem to be their confidence in him. So I don't think it's merely that he's bad. I know I'm guessing with Reek and him and a little bit the same thing here. I do think the shoulder's holding up a bit of his ability to go full bore.
Yeah, my thing is, if you're only comfortable playing him 4 snaps a game in a game where you have 89 snaps because he's injured, just deactivate him. Like, what's the difference between playing 4 snaps and 0 snaps? Nothing. Like, he's not getting anything out of that. You're not getting anything out of that. You would literally get more if you activate Tyreek Smith off the practice squad and had him play 15 snaps. There's no way you wouldn't get more bang for your buck, because it's not like Derek Hall is even good on those 4 snaps. It's not like he has to save up his energy for a whole quarter, but then he gives you some incredible sack. No, he usually just gives up some big play in the run right now.
I think everything you say is right on point with it. Brendan, can I add on top of it one other thing? Is that this team decided at the trade deadline that it wanted to go for it. And it wanted to make a really aggressive move in Leonard Williams with a 2nd-round pick, and that they determined that they were a contending team at that time. Either way this goes with Derek Hall, they understood the reality of what this was with Derek Hall around the trade deadline, being either A, the guy had nothing to give them this year as far as pass rush goes, or B, he's dealing with a shoulder that highly reduces his capability. And if that's the case, and you're down Uchenna and you're down basically Derek Hall and what he can provide to the edge, that makes us have to relook at the edge. And that means it's going to take way more than going and picking Frank Clark off the Broncos for as a spare part kind of addition. than what they did if they wanted to see themselves as a contender. If you just want to get through the season at the position and just sort of muddle your way through, so be it. But we knew Frank Clark wasn't going to provide a whole hell of a lot. We knew coming into this year, Darrell Taylor's limitations in the run game if you put him out there in run defense. And once again, in this game, we saw him being put out there way too many times in run downs and downs where they're likely to try to run the ball, and they would attack right at him and they would find some nice big fat holes. These were things you could have known at the trade deadline if you were going to be in that contender mode, and yet you didn't do anything in addition to it. And that's where it's got to come down to where you decide to go for it or you don't. And now we didn't know that. We didn't know that Derek Hall was in a place where he couldn't even be played but 3 or 4 snaps a game, and not pushing more for an edge to be going and grab, because you could have gotten a functional edge in a trade if you wanted to and given up a 5th round pick. It didn't have to be Chase Young. You could have just gotten something out there. But odd that they've gone down this going, oh no, Taylor and Frank Clark will be able to get us through, along with Dre'Mont Jones being kicked outside.
Yeah. I think that was the plan. Get Leonard Williams, which allows Dre'Mont to kick outside, which, I mean, Leonard Williams has been great here. Individually, I think he's doing what he can. And I think Dre'Mont has been pretty good on the edge. I think that's actually kind of unlocked some parts of him, but it's not nearly enough to overcome the fact that you lost to Nwosu and you're not getting anything out of Hall, and Taylor is still Taylor.
I think it's a really bad move to do it that way. And my reasoning, because part of what the problem was and why you got Leonard Williams was to massage the snap counts and the stamina levels on your defensive linemen through the early part of the year where they were assuming too many snaps. You bring in Dre'Mont and he goes to the edge and Leonard comes in. There's no net benefit then to reducing that snap count with Leonard Williams' presence at that point.
Oh yeah, it's been worse than ever.
Right. So you didn't deal with the one problem at hand, and you've not really improved another thing that's been a faltering option throughout the year by moving Dre'Mont out there. Therefore, the better path and approach should have been to keep Dre'Mont inside and go make another edge move. Keep your interior fresh. Keep it dynamic. Go have Dre'Mont do the thing you paid. You didn't pay Dre'Mont to play edge. I'm glad that he can do that stuff, but that's not why you made him the biggest free agent signing in Seahawks history. You did that because of what he does from the inside. And if the team's already lost confidence that he can provide any productivity from them, again, this is not bear out a lot of optimism and then for the team if that's their standpoint and belief. So I don't know on this one, man. I think that it was a bad way to go to make that the determination here. Bad way to trust Taylor and Clark. And you can see these kind of being not great choices. And I didn't anticipate, I know we started this with Hall. It's kind of the centerpiece of this though, because you're going to go contending, go contend, go get the edge. Did the Niners go, hey, we got Randy Gregory from the Broncos. We got our Frank Clark salvage piece. They kept going. I know that they had Chase and we got Leonard Williams, but they were already reinforced as it was. They reinforced the reinforcements. And, instead of with us, we're trying to just get by always with just barely enough at each position. And this is why one of the reasons why it has some struggles week in and week out.
Yeah, I agree. But I want to also approach this from a slightly different angle. And I want to ask you, I mean, in the modern day, I think fans, because of the internet and because of all the access we have now, we don't have any patience with these players. And that's definitely a bad thing. But I want to ask, are you worried about Derek Hall long-term yet? Are you worried that this guy just might not be any good? He's a bust. I mean, in the old days, like in the mid-00s, the rule was with me and all my football watching friends, you got to give a draft pick 3 years. You got to get to 3 years or else you're judging too quickly. And I know we're not anywhere near year 3 yet, but this is so bad. I got to ask, are you worried about him long-term?
Not at the moment. A big part of that is that I do think that the shoulder thing's a problem, but Coach Carroll referenced it. So it's not me inventing it. He talked about when they had him off the field that he's been dealing with it since training camp. And this is the way it goes at times where they have to be open and upfront about certain injuries, but other times they're going to be very nebulous about it. And you just have to find out at the end of the year when they go to get surgery, we'll all be going, oh, wow, Derek Hall got shoulder surgery. I guess that shoulder was really bad throughout the year. And if it's that, then there's none of that we can place on him, is it? Because if he's dealing with a torn labrum in the shoulder or he can't function with the arm ain't really moving right, then it's like, how do you hit him for that at that point? I don't know. That's hard for me to do. In regards to edge rush, I did a background dump, Brendan, on looking at edge rushers since 2017 that were selected in the second round. The highest production, as far as let's just say a sack count of those guys in those 6 year span was 4. It was one guy. Everybody else 1, 2, 2, 1, 1.5, including guys that have even been on our team, including Darrell Taylor or Boye Mafe. These are in the same category through this time period drafted.
Frank Clark second round or third round?
Frank Clark was second round, but he was 2016. But he was also he was 3 sacks, I think, his first year as well. So my thinking with that is, I could be wrong on this, but my thinking with that and looking at that data and being that across the board, it's about 16 players, that edge rush is a rush that you can get the freakazoids in round 1, right? That have got those, they can give you the instant impact Nick Bosa types or the Micah Parsons types. But if you're going into the second round, you're going to have to get more of the guy who's going to have to be this a little bit not self-made, but he's going to have a little bit more working on his bag, on his tool kilt to get himself to that place where he's good to go. Mafe had a couple of sacks last year. I don't think that he was showing us necessarily the pass rush ability he showed this year. Mafe also showed a lot more of the run defense game than Hall has, but this makes me think that we've got to definitely be more patient with Hall. And to your greater question to the thing, I think it depends on the position. If it's a running back and he's coming out of college, he should be able to hit the ground running. I shouldn't have to wait 3 years to figure out where he's at. With the receiver position at times, I think you should kind of know what you got in that pretty quickly. Yeah, give him a year. I don't know if you need 3 years to the wide receiver position. Other positions, you're right, though. A quarterback, maybe offensive lineman, edge. But I think different positions you give different timetables to because of how hard or how simplistic they are in order to play.
I got to tell you, though, unless Derek Hall is completely wiped out by this injury, like he literally can't do anything, there's no way he would give you worse than what Frank Clark is giving you. There's just no way. Like, Frank Clark is so close to the bottom of the barrel that there's no more below the barrel that you can get to wherever Derek Hall is. So it's very weird to me that he can't get playing time over Frank Clark. It feels like Carroll is so obsessed with trying to get this team into the playoffs that he really wants to play veterans. He doesn't want to play these rookies, even though it would benefit them long-term, maybe. Like, that's why Hall doesn't play, and that's why McIntosh doesn't play on offense.
Makes sense. I mean, it very well could be that. It makes a lot of sense that he's going that way. It's also the thing that we're learning that gets to be frustrating, and I hate to hammer it, but it's the team will see things that work well offensively and defensively, or not working well offensively or defensively, and they don't take that into any account. They just act like it's going to suddenly self-correct itself. And we could very early on see Frank Clark was not going to be able to bring anything anymore. He looks 20 pounds lighter than he was when he was last year. He is not providing any kind of close to hurry pressures, nothing in the run game. Darrell Taylor, very much the same way, but they trot these guys out there as though, they're going to suddenly magically turn on. And it's a problem with this team for years that they've done this, where they just keep waiting for a guy to go who's not going to pop. It's not happening, and I don't know why they do it, man. I don't, but it's the counterintuitive nature of how some of the things are kind of set up right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think Carroll plays them because in his mind, it's like they're veterans. I can trust them. I can't trust McIntosh. I can't trust Hall because they're rookies.
Yeah, I guess I can get that a little bit, but then, you're saying you trust them, but you trust them to do what? Trust them to bring pressure, trust them to tackle, trust them to play the run, trust them to not get fooled, I guess, is what you're thinking with that, is that they won't get misdirected. But all that other stuff they are allowing. They are being net negatives in the run game and as pass rushers and all that other stuff. So what is that? It's like that stuff that we get to that gets really like to the subtlety stuff of things where you're not really speaking to a specific of what they're bringing. It's like this intangible that we can't really quantify in the football field. It exists, it's like, well, trust us, it exists, it's there, but you don't really see how it exactly shows up. And I can get down to the intricate details where it's like, does he set the edge in the run game? No. How are his run game instincts right now? Sucks. You go down the line to the little finer details on it, and it never quite gets good there. Both with Frank and Derek, they're both in the same boat for me as far as watching his players. Daryl's trying a little bit harder this year from an effort standpoint than he has in the past, but he just doesn't have the sand in the pants to root down at the point of attack, and he doesn't have the instincts or awareness in space to be able to find the running back during the play. And it's a 1-2 punch of not working. And it makes our defense at times just Swiss cheese.
Yeah, ever since, remember Marquise Blair? Remember the stuff that happened with him where it seemed like Pete Carroll would rather take a bath in battery acid than actually play him. He did whatever it took to keep him off the field. And I theorized at the time, I said, Pete Carroll would rather play a player that he knows is going to be like a D+ than a player who could be good, but might also be like an F-.
So it's certainly possible. And it would make a lot of sense for why some of these decisions are done like they are with certain guys who keep getting trotted out. And it's like, yeah, but why? Why are you doing what's this guy, I mean, in Taylor's case, is it because he's just a second round pick? And but it's going to be what it is now and in the future of the season, no matter whether or not this team offensively continues to find its footing or the defense can find some places they do well. Both in Clark and Taylor's case, they're not getting better as players. There will not be an improvement point for either of these guys. They're going to be places that opposition is going to attack on a weekly basis. And if you want to look no further, when you watch the Niners ground game this upcoming week and you see McCaffrey go for a 20-yard play, go check who the defensive is to the play side that they're going to. And I almost guarantee it ain't going to be Mafe. You'll be looking at it. It'll be one of Taylor or Frank Clark. And that's just, they know it. And Shanahan knows it. All these guys know it, that they can go at it right now with this defense. That's how bad it is to have, but it's one thing to have just one guy. If you got a Taylor like last year, that your rotational pass rusher, and then you can limit his rundowns, that's one thing. But when you can't limit the rundowns because you got two of them, and you're trying to take a defensive tackle to try to take some of that offloading, he's only gonna be able to do so much of that. That's where you end up.
Andrex, thank you for the $1.99. Building my parlay, would you take the San Francisco money line or take the points? San Fran's kind of due for a little bit of a letdown game after what they did to Philly, right?
Well, and they might be very much. This wouldn't be a game I'd like to take, Adrian X, because like Brendan's saying, this is a game where it's been a long season. Niners have been riding high recently with some really nice wins. They got all their guys back. They're feeling good. They come back into this Seahawks game and they're looking at the Hawks and the tape on the Hawks, and they know they've beaten them now 4 straight times and beaten them pretty easily 4 straight times. Do they let up a little bit? Do they drop their guard a hair? That's all it can kind of take. That's why I wouldn't like this game necessarily, even on the surface of it. It's one of those things with betting where it's like the obvious bets like this on the front are always the ones that'll, usually bite you in the butt, because you get that let down by the Niners where they just have a game where they decide to not turn it on, and sleepwalk through reports. And meanwhile, the Hawks are desperate as hell. They got that cornered animal thing going on, and it's two different energies.
I think you would feel pretty good about the San Francisco money line. I would stay away from the points, though. I don't have a ton of confidence that we're going to do what we need to do to win, but I do wonder if San Fran's just going to go through the motions and win by 7 points or something and just say, well, we proved ourselves last week. It's cool.
Yeah, one of those games where they feel like they have it the whole way, but they're just going to keep it kind of safe and cards close. Yeah, I'm with that.
Kind of like what the Huskies did the entire second half of the season. They just won everything.
There we go.
One score.
They're keeping it all hidden for the championship game, Brendan. They got a whole bunch of playbook right now that we've never seen that's coming out for the championship.
Andrex, thank you for the $1.99 again. Would y'all consider taking Niner game off? Rest. Yeah, that's not really how it works, though.
Yeah, it's not really a deal that's on the table, and quite frankly, no. I'm trying to build in my assessment of Coach Carroll right now to get to the final point. There's a lot of people that are calling for Coach Carroll's firing at this point and saying it's time and all that, but I'm not at that stage. I am going to get to the end of this year and get to a concluded point on this, and I will maybe be at that stage if things kind of hold it tight. But I'm also giving Carroll the time here to make some adjustments, or at least try some different things. It's not even about him finding success in trying those different things. It's just simply, this ain't working, this ain't working, this ain't working, this ain't working, this ain't working. It's all not working because you're kind of trying the same thing. Basically, you can pick out little details of things if you want to get to semantics that you're doing differently, but the overarching thing is the same most of the way through. Try some different stuff. Lean into what you do well. And if you were to show me that would give me a little bit more emboldened faith for going forward into the future of the Hawks beyond this year, versus going through the rest of this year through the same kind of going through the motions of the same stuff they've been doing that hasn't worked, which won't work going through the rest of this year. And that would allow me to get to the assessment. So one less game is not what I want. I want one more game to make the assessment on that.
Right. I agree. I mean, you can't really take a game off anyway, and tanking is not a real thing at this point in the season. Like, even the Miami Dolphins that were famously getting paid to tank still won a bunch of games at the end of the year. So that it's not a realistic possibility anyway.
Yeah, I just think 10. I'm an anti-tank guy as it is anyway, just on general terms. So even on this thing where you're still in it, you still got a fighting chance. There are adjustments to be had in this offense and defense to find some more success. It doesn't mean I got the end all be all fix for everything, but that I think that there's some advantages that we're not taking fully advantage of.
Bronze Sausage, thank you for the $1.99. What are your opinions on Adams and Diggs? Go Hawks. So let's start with let's start with Diggs.
He's going into the final year of his deal after this year. The Seattle Seahawks, I think in the case of both of these two guys, are going to move on after this season, because these are the two guys that I think are likeliest to create as much of, between these two guys and Brian Monet, you can pretty much create like $26 million, $27 million of cap space just with those three cuts alone.
Nick Bellore.
Nick Bellore, throw him on in there too. So who knows if they'd be willing to do that. With Quandre Diggs, I think he's played better than Adams overall. I still don't think that he's playing where I feel comfortable making him a top 10 paid safety next year. And the Seahawks did the grand experiment of investing in these safeties over the past couple of years when the rest of the NFL has leaned away from it. It's a little bit akin to paying two running backs prime market money at the same time. You went really extreme in this direction. You tried to zig when everyone else is zagging, and it got you electrocuted on the fence. So now let's dial it back. It's no longer working. In Diggs's case, you can save the money, move off of him, take Kobe Bryant, move him to free safety, have him battle it out with Jarek Reed, maybe draft a guy somewhere in this draft. There's some pretty good safeties to take a look at in this draft, even maybe a little later on, third, fourth round. In Jamal Adams' case, again, even more extreme, I think the argument here. He's a top 5 paid safety. He's not giving you that. You're not sending him on the blitz, Brendan. We're currently right now blitzing him at a rate that is below, let me say this again, below the rate that he was blitzed at with the Jets this year. Just want to put that out there for general, just understanding on utilization and how to best put a player in the right positions to succeed. You post June 1st him, $10 million dead money this year and the next, but ultimately you cumulatively save a ton of money. And those 3 big cuts alone, I think, save you a lot of space to go out there and make some moves happen.
Yeah. I think Diggs does go. He doesn't really do anything anymore. I know people on Seahawks Twitter have been trying to defend him a lot lately, but I just don't see it. Like, he's not made any meaningful plays this year. All he really does is tackle, and he's not a good tackler. Like you notice him in some games, like, oh, he made a tackle 12 yards down the field.
Yeah,
but there's just nothing there. Adams, I do see the occasional play made. Like, occasionally you're like, oh, there's a splash play from Adams. There's something nice. But I feel like we should move on from Adams. I don't think we will. I just don't.
They may not. I mean, we'll see what they do with it. They need to create space, and we both acknowledge that. You're not sitting on $7 million, and Diggs alone is not going to get it done. And yeah, Monet can do it, and maybe Disley. But again, with Disley, you're already losing 2 tight ends. Does he really, that whole thing that people glom onto with Disley being the guy you're going to cut, thinking it through a little bit, I go, I don't know on that one. You don't have any other tight ends in the room. You might like having him in there as the certain thing and then being able to add around him, especially with some younger guys. So he's not, as to me, the likely guy. When I go to where you go to the cuts, Tyler, it's not happening there. There's no money to be saved. We get really low on the list of places that you can actually create the space and cap from. Maybe Dre'Mont Jones. But when it comes to even as bad as I've not liked where Dre'Mont Jones has been, I would still trust in him being operated inside more than I would trust those two guys back there. And again, I think you've got to just kind of cut bait with the safety project at some point or another, realizing you're not getting the performance from these guys, number one, at the front of this. Neither guy is giving you top 5, top 10 level safety play in this sport, be it by a PFF metric or just the basic eye test. And number 2, you're expending assets into this position that could be going somewhere else to make you better overall as a team. It's not a good use of resources. You also have Julian Love sitting here on the book as well. So it's very easy to potentially, in my opinion, you Kobe Bryant, Jarek Reed, battle out free safety, draft maybe a guy, you slide in Julian Love as your full-time strong safety, and you kind of call it a day on that one at that point. I think that's the way they should go, really.
I believe it would be more likely if Reed didn't tear his ACL. if Reed was healthy and developing and was definitely going to be ready for the start of next year, I'd be more likely to believe we just go young at safety. But I wonder if we got to keep Adams for one more year, or we keep Diggs for one more year because Reed, his timetable got pushed back. That's what I'm kind of thinking.
I think it's more likely at that point you keep Diggs, because Diggs is more of kind of the voice in the locker room. Adams has got a little bit of the wild child thing going on, and Adams has the injury front going forward, right? Where, do you really trust the ability of Adams to hold up going forward? He's going to miss some games this year again. That's got to be a part of this, and trusting that contract and where it's at versus now finally being able to save money to get out from under the contract, which we weren't able to do last offseason. Really, you're going to have to just take really a dead money hit at that point and make it work. This offseason of post June 1st actually does free you up. I think you've got to pull that ripcord on this deal at this point and just call it a day. And I think if the team didn't, Brendan, I think it would be indicative of the fact that they're not willing to just kind of move on when they've had mistakes made. Instead, that they, like they've done on draft picks, holding on to guys, and at some point it'll come around. Eskridge, he'll come around. Taylor, he'll come around. Rasheem Green, he'll come around. LJ Collier, he'll come around. Rather than expecting these things that are not working to suddenly start working, move on and pivot. The teams that are aggressive, the teams that don't linger in this league, are the teams that are able to then go back and find success all that much faster. And part of the problem we have right now, in my opinion, on defense is both of those two players. Again, when we go to, is he part of the problem or is he part of the solution? Maybe he gives you a splashy play, does Jamal Adams, but I don't think that he's giving you a net positive on that football field right now. And for the cost that he's costing, that's unacceptable. Because we're not paying for his past performance in New York. We're paying about the performance he needs to provide right here and now.
Right. Okay. So that's about it for the defense. Officials, it was bad, but I'm going to continue to say what I've been saying for a while. This is the most penalized team in the league. And when we complain about this stuff in post-game press conferences, what it sounds like we're saying is we don't want to be the most penalized team by far. We want to be the most penalized team by a little. Because we're talking about, a couple of calls in these games, these last couple games, a couple bad calls. It's like, even if you take those bad calls out, we're still leading the league in penalties. It's like, just stop committing penalties. How about that?
Yeah, well, it's another part of the evaluation that I'm going to be building into what I look at with Coach Carroll and this team. When people ask me about confidence going forward, when you and I have conversations about confidence going forward, and the fact that the penalty situation has been one that's been ongoing for years that has not been addressed. The proof being is that this is a 10-year problem. This is going to be the fourth time in 10 years that you will be the most penalized team in the entire NFL. There are 32 NFL teams.
Yeah.
Let's put that in perspective. It doesn't quite add up. And if you can build a legendary defense that can go to Super Bowls despite that, that's one thing where we can overlook it and go, look, there's no reason to question that, because why look at how the sausage is made? The results are what they are. But when the results are failing and the results aren't getting to where you're wanting them to get to from a contending status perspective, then you are going to look back at those things and go, look, I can feel every given week when we're giving up 130 penalty yards on a weekly basis that this is holding back the team and being a factor in the losing. It isn't just merely the players playing bad. This thing right here is being a big part of what's causing this to be, a loss. And Hawks had a disciplinary once before that got them to the mountaintop by being on the details and by caring about penalties. Mike Holmgren was built that way, of being more in the, we're going to, not get penalized to death. And his teams were a lot more disciplined in that respect of things. So you don't just have to be wild and free to get to a Super Bowl with the penalty situation. That's the only way to do it. You can go on the other side of it as well. I'm not asking for Carroll to become a disciplinarian at his age here at this point, but it is say something, Brendan, when you're not just the worst in the NFL, you're the worst in the NFL by a very wide margin. It's kind of gets more egregious even at that stage of things. And again, a thing that when we start talking about going forward on this team and feeling good things that we can feel good about, how do we get to a contending state? We arrived in this point of the season. We go, okay, we fell short this year. We all accept that. Let's mourn, move on. Okay, how we get there next year? We got an offense and a defense that's unchanging. We had an undisciplined football team with a coach that doesn't really care a lot, seems about discipline. We're spending money in places we shouldn't be, that they may still continue to spend the money in the places they shouldn't, that they're not getting the returns on. Where is the change? We'll alter the course here to find that contending status, because this course right now, where we're going down this line, isn't working.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty excited for, hopefully, whenever we get a new coach, be it, this year, next year, 10 years, 1,500 years, whenever. I hope it's somebody, not a disciplinarian, because disciplinarian doesn't really work anymore. Like, the players just tune those guys out. But somebody who does have more focus on the details.
The details. It's a great way of putting it. Just the details, Brendan. It's not about having the guy that's a drill sergeant, but just somebody that you're on the details. It's not all big picture stuff, that you're getting down on it with your guys and getting them in that range of things.
Yeah, I do think that the trying to be the player's friend thing has kind of run its course. This is why Wade Phillips never lasted very long anywhere he went, I think, because eventually that approach, I remember Wade Phillips in Dallas, they would ask him, why does your team lead the league in penalties every year? And he's like, well, we won the division last year, even though we won the league in penalties. So why should I care about penalties? We still won the division. And then 3 days later, he was fired because his team was 1-7 or something. And it's like, that's why you should care. But I do think that stuff wears out eventually.
I do too. It's a thing that it gets, and again, if this was just a thing that was on its own on this team, but it's a little bit of the theme right now of this coaching staff. And again, it's a bit of a positive too, because it's something that they can correct and change. But when they run into issues or they run into problems, they don't look to find solutions to the problems. They keep kind of hammering it, and they hammer it with the same thing. And they don't pivot off. They won't kind of pivot. And so you're going to be the most disciplined team. And Carroll just says, well, we've made it a point of emphasis. We've tried all we can try. It's like, well, what are other NFL teams doing at that point to find this consistency that you're not? What is the magic solution you're not looking for? And part of me wonders on that thing of everything being in-house and what their hirings are and everything, is that a lack of you bringing out the outside ideas and how to train this properly? Because again, it's not a 1 or 2 year problem. It's a 10-year problem, really. You've never been in the top 10. You've been first in 10 years with the most penalized team. You've never been the top 10 and the least penalized team in that period as well. You never had an outlier year where you're like the 8th least penalized team in the sport. So it's been a continuous problem, and it's something that they've got to start to address. It's gotten way too extreme.
Yeah. Remember in Casino, De Niro saying he wants an equal number of blueberries in every muffin?
Mm-hmm.
I want my next coach to demand that all the muffins at the VMAC have an equal number of blueberries. That's what I want.
That or no brown or no blue Skittles or whatever.
Isn't it like green M&Ms or something?
Yeah, it's green, no green M&Ms. It's one of those two.
That's what I want. If I hear that the next Seahawks head coach demands an equal number of blueberries in every muffin, I'll feel like we're in a good place.
I will too. I would like more of that too. Part of why I've said I've been a big guy and thinking Harbaugh would be a great coach if you could bring him in, because I think he'd be kind of that ideally kind of guy that would fit in that role well here. And what this team kind of needs at this point is a little bit, I think, more of that.
Mm-hmm. Special teams, there's not really any much to say. I mean, Jason Myers is still dead to me, but that you can't be more dead to me than dead. Like, you can't be deader than dead. So that nothing changed. Dixon got to take the day off, and that's really all there is to say about special teams, right?
Yeah. Again, the Myers deal not looking great, and make you, again, head-scratching deal. And when you signed it at the time and where we stand now with it, just another one of the ones you could kind of see coming.
Yeah, should have been a contract that only paid him every other year, I guess, because that's that would have worked.
Good news is next year he'll be great. So that's the good part about this.
Mm-hmm. All right. A few more donos to get through here. Corey Olson, thank you for the $5. Problem with me is we save all this money just to spend it on bottom barrel players to get depth instead of bringing in a big name or two.
Yeah, I mean, they did try to do the Dre'Mont Jones signing, and I mean, if that's a big name signing, so they did try to take a swing there. To your point, Corey, though, I think that's where a lot of these 1-year deals they've given out, guys like Mario Edwards Jr. or Jaron Reed, or bringing back last year, a couple of the guys they had in here, the Quentin Jefferson. They tend to seem to like they're trying to find guys that they can find on like a low value point who might have that magical year in them and there where they have that like career best year, but they're paying like pennies on the dollar for it. And Edwards Jr. being a good case where it's former like second round picks, got some true talent, never able to fully really tap into it, maybe coming off one of his stronger years. Let's try to gamble on that low risk guy down on the low side. I think they're a little of doing that. I think the Mariners organization is doing a little bit of this, and we'll be doing a little bit of this in free agency too. And it's a way you go that is a way, but like your frustration with it, Corey, I get where it's not the chances of hitting on those guys are pretty small. They are what they are, when you get them.
The real problem here is we're not willing to do a lot of backloading for one reason or another.
Mm-hmm.
So one, I think there are some players out there who won't come because they're not going to get that 4-year, 5-year deal. Like, I think the reason why we got Dre'Mont is because he was okay with a 3-year deal. If he had said, I want 4 years, we would have just had to say, sorry, we can't do it because our ownership is planning to sell soon and we don't want this long-term money on the books. So that's part of it. I do wonder if there's going to be money to bring in big names anyway. Like we're not that far away from kind of getting capped out here with some of the contracts we already have. Guys like Metcalf are going to count for more against the cap. Gino's going to be a bigger cap hit next year. With some of the money that we've doled out to, like Dre'Mont Jones is a good example. Now, if we do clear the books a little bit and dump guys like Diggs and Adams, not so much. But as of right now, there's not really any money to spend on big names.
I think the team could really be on it, and this will be a conversation certainly we're going to have this off season. But considering how far we look from contending status right now as a team, I would offer we're not even a good team this year, much less a contending team, and we're regressing in year 2 of the rebuild, and that leads me to believe that we are much further away than we are closer to the mark. And if that's the case, I think you've got to get back to pulling this a bit back down to unfortunately, going one step back so you can go 2 steps forward. And that does mean to me getting out of the bad deals and turning this back in a different direction from a strategical sense in your roster building perspective.
Yeah. And generally speaking, when you bring in a big free agent name, you're going to overpay. That's just how this works. So not doing the free agent thing is not bad. The problem is you need to draft very well to make up for it. And for a long time, we didn't. Now it seems like we are.
Exactly. I think this is why the Leonard Williams trade's one, too, that I know people still don't like a lot, but why I do like it, why I still do anticipate you're going to sign him to a contract extension, and why it makes sense, because you weren't going to find that guy necessarily readily available to grab him on the open market or pay the same price. You'll be able to maybe pay in-house. We'll see on that, but you're guaranteed to get him this way. You're guaranteed to have that hole somewhat fixed. But my opinion, Brendan, is we're going to go in this offseason. I lead with 3 moves at the top, and that is I would look to move Dre'Mont Jones in a trade if I could do it. If I can't, I would outright release him. I would move on from Jamal Adams with the post-June 1st designation, and I'd move on from Quandre Diggs. And I really wouldn't be looking at, like, how can we get to contending status next year? I'd be looking at how do we get this right? Because you got a lot of correcting, in my opinion, to do on both sides of the ball, especially on both sides of the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, and Pete won't do any of that because he has already said he doesn't know what the word rebuild means. Yeah. So, unfortunately, we're stuck here for now.
Yeah, exactly.
And Corey, this is a follow-up to his initial super chat. Thank you for the $2 talking about the defensive line. I actually would argue that we got pretty great value out of our defensive line signings, though. Like, Jaron Reed was great until we ran him into the ground by playing him 800 snaps a game.
I think that's a big part of it, is that you just haven't been able to manage the rotations right. And this is the problem with it, having a defense that doesn't get teams off the field on 3rd downs and allows so much long drives and continued long successive drives, is that the guys get worn down over the course of a season, game after game, that happening. It's just, that's the way that's going to go.
Radu Turkhan, thank you for the $4.99. New player, old player, doesn't matter. Could draft a world's best generational talent, but we all know what the main problem is. Pete Carroll, fire him. Yeah, this is the general sentiment I'm trying to hammer here. Like, this defense currently ranks 25th in the league in points allowed. 25th. They have ranked 25th in the league in points allowed twice before. Last year and the first year Pete Carroll was here. Now think about the players on that 25th ranked defense. Think about what he had to work with that season and tell me, why is that defense just as good as this defense? It makes no sense.
No, it doesn't. And I do think that there are a lot of problems on this team to deal with, and there is a personnel problems you got to deal with. But yeah, you're right. I think that the front of this is Coach Carroll and his philosophies and designs that are driving this team in a direction that's not providing fruit. And I don't think it's going to provide fruit in the future. Not that they'll be necessarily bad. He does always, as me and Brendan say, have seemingly a floor that he can create in every team, but that he will be unable to bring them to a place of contention. And I struggle to find that confidence. I'll give him through the year to see if he'll make the adjustments, but I think it's going and driving pretty hard in this direction. And I'm not going to be able to find in my own heart places to think that he's just going to magically find a fix when he won't even accept that there's an issue at hand or a problem that needs to be fixed in the first place.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's crazy we have the same record as the Rams, by the way, with the talent that they have, with the fact that they made no effort to get better in the offseason off a team that was atrocious last year. Like that's such a joke, by the way. That I mean, I don't think we can talk enough about how bad that is.
No, with a very similar schedule as well, right? Because there's 3 games of difference at the end of the day that we'll play in schedule between the difference of Rams and us. And so, yeah, I think it's a very good team to look at. They got $50 million of dead money on their books. There's a lot of teams, Brendan, even that, if you go to one, there's even more depressing teams when you start looking at the teams that have 5 wins, for instance. We're 1 game better than this team. At the end of this, we're 1 game better than that team. You know, what, we're 2 games better than the Raiders? Really? I mean, it's, yeah, I think that this team is vastly underperforming right now, vastly. And some of that's on maybe some of the players and the lack of fire not playing up to their capabilities, but a big part of that also comes back to the coaching staff and maybe some of the evaluation too. But it is the reality of what's going on right now is you got way more talent on this team that's not playing up to their abilities than you should.
Labrador Hawk, thank you for the $5. Hey guys, both your channels are awesome. Think Seahawks have a better chance to win versus Niners or Eagles? It's got to be the Eagles, right?
Eagles, because you're at home, and maybe the Niners showed this last week against the Eagles that, you know, they are far and away the best in the NFC. Not merely the best in the NFC, but far and away. That would look how it's
Eagles have been dancing through the raindrops lately.
They have. They've not had a season of like last year where it was a lot more feeling dominant, their performance. And this one feels more like they're kind of finding a way to win, which in itself is a good ability to find and have, and sometimes fight in some of those close matchups. But getting kind of having the doors blown off by the Niners certainly leads me to believe that maybe we're, a little bit in closer range with them.
So yeah, I definitely think it's the Eagles. And honestly, with the way the Eagles have been playing, that might actually be a half decent game at this rate. Like I don't think we're going to win either game, to be clear.
We got pumped out to Monday night, so I think the Eagles game will be a lot more, hopefully, funner. This upcoming matchup in San Francisco is going to be maybe a tough one.
Yeah. The only thing with the Niners game that I can say is it is a trap game for them because of what they just did to the Eagles.
Yeah, it is a possibility, and especially that they beat us so many times over. They might just be a little bit like, we got this. We could just kind of just hit the cruise control and still beat Seattle,
Yeah. Tezu Kako, thank you for the $2.79 Canadian. What should we look for in the draft? Well, we've got some upcoming shows that are going to be very, very focused on that. But I don't know. Off the top of your head, what are you prioritizing?
I think guards got to be a priority. Defensive tackle and middle linebacker would be probably the 3 positions I'd hold as highest priority. Potentially, depending on what you do at the safety position with cuts, releases, trades, you might be looking, safety as well with that. And tight end would be the 2 kind of honorable mentions, I would say, with it. But those would be the 3 that I would try to maybe get a little bit more laser focused in on especially at the top of the draft, if I could.
Yeah. I really want to come out of this draft with a franchise left guard. I really want somebody I'm just like, yes, this guy's going to handle that position for the next decade, and I feel great about it.
I would too. It's been a long problematic position for us, and we haven't had an answer there in quite a bit of time. So getting somebody in there and getting some good quality and putting them next to Cross and starting to build up a nice little left side there would be really, really advantageous. So that I would put it as the highest priority, getting the guard first, followed by defensive tackle, followed by middle linebacker. But I think they will get each of those coming out of the draft.
And that's one reason why I'm not happy about getting a higher pick because of all this losing. Like, you can get the top left guard prospects late in the first. Like, I don't feel like what's the benefit of us losing these games? We might get Jerzan Newton. Like, that's nice, but if you wanted to get Graham Barton or Cooper Bebe, they're still going to be there even if you make the playoffs and win a game.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's the upside is if you do lose out and you're at like 11 or 10, that then you can trade back to 23 and pick back up that second round pick that you lost.
Yeah, if we lose out, it is possible we get as high as like 7, I think. That's like feasible. That's like the best case scenario that's reasonable.
It's possible with it. You never know with this team on that. So
yeah, but again, like I'm not taking Graham Barton at 7. So if that ends up costing me the left guard, then I'm still not thrilled about it. I'll be pretty thrilled about getting Jerzan Newton because he's such a monster, but I'm still going to be like, okay, we're still not addressing this obvious problem, and we have no way to address it for another year.
That's where I come down to you make those cuts that you have to make out of necessity to clear the cap space. And then in creating those cuts, you drive an onus to John Schneider to want to then get more picks. Because there's not a lot of cap space to make the additions that you need to then fill those spots out on the open market. The whole point is that you don't have money in the first place, and you got to kind of fill those positions where you can in other places. So that's where I would come down to if you are in a high first round, you move back, you pick up that extra second, or you pick up an extra third, you're at then the 22, 23 range. And like you say, a Graham Barton or a Cooper Bebe at that point becomes more in line with where you can get them at. And you pick up that extra pick. I think you would do that rather than just taking the native guy there, unless they really do fall in love with a guy, which if they were at 7, 8, 9, I don't know if they necessarily would.
Radu Turkan, thank you for the member message for 1 month. Do you see Love being a replacement for Diggs or Adams if we release them or release Love as well? This is an interesting one. This one I struggle with.
There's no reason to release Love. He's on a cheap 1-year remaining deal after this season, and he can play both free safety and strong safety. So he provides you both flexibility and being able to play both positions, which also opens the door, if the team ever were to want to take advantage of it, of truly running some of the Fangio split safety looks, where you have your free safety doing strong safety stuff and your strong safety doing free safety stuff, as opposed to right now, pre-snap, I know Diggs is going to be my single high safety. I know Adams is coming down in the box. So you could definitely then maybe pair Love up with a guy that has a similar skill set at that point and be able to have them operate with a little bit of difference in that coverage looks. First, how you do it now. But Love's really cheap next year, and I just think that you know what you're getting with him.
I will say you save a lot of money if you release him because most of his money is not guaranteed. And while everything you say is true, he hasn't been very good here. So it wouldn't shock me if we moved on, but I'm not pounding the table for that.
And I'm not pounding the table necessarily to keep him if there's a better option. And look, I mean, I want to see them turn off of we're spending a lot of money at the safety position, but there is a bit of he's been here now a year. He knows the program. If Carroll still remains here, some of that to me factors in a bit with this. And there's been some moments I've liked what I've seen from him in coverage at times too. I'll give you that he hasn't necessarily been great, but you're not paying him an exceptional amount of money either. He's not on the same kind of contractual deal per year basis of what you're paying to Diggs and Adams. In Adams' case, you're paying 4 times the money for him versus what you're going to be paying to Julian Love. So I think there's maybe a value to holding him at that point, but again, he can play even slot if you need to him in a pinch. But if they moved on, I wouldn't be cursing. I just want to see them not dump $50 million into the position on a yearly basis. When the rest of the league's probably spending what, Brendan? 12 million, 13 million collectively probably to the position.
Yeah, it's bad. It's really bad. Upo, thank you for the $10. A high second round pick needs to play immediately because he's being paid like a low end starter, but you don't get a 5th-year option. Playing 10 snaps a game is wasting 25% of that high second's life cycle. I do agree in this circumstance because clearly you got Derek Hall with the plan for him to play some immediately. And the fact that you're activating him for these games does tell me that you want him to be able to play, and then you just don't play him. I do think there are some circumstances where you can take a player in the high second round and then go, well, we're going to put you on ice for a year. Like a quarterback, really raw defensive lineman. I could see it. But in Derek Hall's case, I do agree he should be playing a decent amount more than he is.
Yeah, if he's healthy, Upo, he should be playing more. No doubt about it. Second round pick. There's no just saying, well, you got to give these guys a year to get through. I mean, Boye Mafe, I could go through this last year, Mafe and his growing pains, but he was playing and he was out there going through it. And if Taylor and Frank Clark on the other end of this were providing some high level quotient of play that you didn't want to have the drop off by going to Hall in a rookie year, then that would be something. But neither of those is the case. And so he should be out there and going if he is healthy. Absolutely.
The asset of having a player on a rookie deal is, I think, I still think it's underrated at this point. Fans don't understand how valuable it is to have good players on rookie deals. So you got to strike when that's the case.
You do indeed. That's when you need to maximize it. So hopefully, if I can't bring it this year, I'll come back next year with something.
Radu Tukan, thank you for the $4.99. WTF has Ballore done for this team? This isn't a party. This is the NFL. Is it me or a winning coach doesn't do this crap? Save money and more depth.
Team falls in love with its guys. It's another, just kind of feels like I just got in a point of failing after failing after failing after failing after failing. As you keep recycling back through here, when you have free agent markets and bringing this guy back and bringing that guy back, and Ballore's case, paying the money you did with him, which made no sense at the time at all for a 34-year-old player, but then even made less sense when you came to understand the NFL was adjusting the rule book on kick returns. There's just sort of favored guys on this team, I guess. And the whole, I'm kind of at the wit's end with the culture, locker room guy, this stuff to me, and even Coach Carroll's culture or any of this stuff, it doesn't have a lot of value to me when it's not really bringing a disciplined football team that goes out and can be a contending team for a 10-year period. I mean, what good is the culture when that is what that merits out? And maybe the players feel warm and fuzzy about going in every day to the building and trying to get better, but I don't know if it's bringing out the best product on the field. And, the same thing true with the Ballore signing that, like you've mentioned before, and I agree, it's probably very much a culture locker room kind of deal,
yeah.
But
he's not here for Sunday. He's here for Monday through Saturday.
Yeah, and my problem with the whole thing is I don't understand the signings for culture and chemistry. Like what we signing guys for mascot because they're a colorful personality in the locker room. You gave him a good chunk of change money to make that happen for a guy that was barely going to play. It's just a lot of moves with this team that they make that are just they're wild and don't make a lot of sense.
Again, I think it is the Udonis Haslem situation, but the Heat always win. So they clearly have something there that works. They're always deep in the playoffs, always dancing with the finals, always either making it or almost making it. And we don't. So it's like, okay, what's your culture worth compared to the Miami Heat's culture?
Well, even Udonis Haslem, though, at least that guy comes out off the bench and he's going to set screens, rebound, and play defense. And you can't rely on him to score a lick, but he gives you that on that end of the court every offensive possession for the other team when he's on the field. When he's going like this, we're not getting the same kind of impact on Ballore here. And you look through the signings the offseason, Jason Myers, when you could look at that signing and you could go, okay, look, the guy's not consistently great. You're paying him like he's consistently great. You're going to pay Nick Ballore to be the highest paid, special teamer out there. You remember with those two deals alone, remember, Brendan, they ate 25% of the chunk of their cap up with those two signings alone in the offseason. It took a pretty massive chunk out for what you could do through the rest of the offseason. And it wasn't no little mark, and not good signings in retrospect.
Yeah. I would say, though, that by the end, Haslem only played in 10 games a season. Like he was a player coach, and they felt like they still got value out of him because he wasn't making that much money, and they felt like it was worth it. But with Ballore, I'm not seeing it. It's right. Like they put him on the field as a linebacker at the goal line a couple times this year, but I think you could have put John Radigan out there in those situations and not really miss anything, right?
Yeah, I agree. I just don't think there's any value there for what you're spending on. And we've got to get less contracts on the books where we're looking at the players going, man, we're not getting the value of that contract. Man, we're not getting the value of that contract. That's how we lead to a team that's not contending, paying guys that aren't worth it.
John, thank you for the $4.99. Would it be totally crazy to try Kobe Bryant and Jarek Reed at safety next year? I don't see anything crazy in this statement.
There's nothing crazy in it. I don't think that you have to ride or die with them as that's your front guys. And then you just get sort of 6th and 7th rounders and stack behind them. I think you get them some competition, but you lead with those two guys having a good, honest try. You let competition be king. We've tried with overvaluing the safety position and spending a ton of money into it. Maybe we try going a little bit of the other way with this, especially if it's ahead of maybe building up the defensive line a little bit more healthier. But I think those guys would both be in line to be in the mix. I don't know if you just earmark them to start, but they would certainly be in the competition for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be some way to use Kobe Bryant effectively. Like he gets back from the injury, we put him in on special teams against the Niners, and the first things he does is he forces a fumble. He punches the ball out, Peanut Tillman style. Like we got to find a way to use that. Like that is such a skill that he has. He could be the best fumble forcer in the NFL. He forced 4 his rookie year and 2 that were taken away by the refs, and now he's already forced 1 this year despite barely playing.
Yeah, I would love to see him out there on the field. I don't know if safety is going to be the best position for him. That's the other thing with it. They're trying him there, and I don't know what we have from him out there. So that's the only problem there is you might get the Peanut Tillman, but I don't know if he can do the rest of the stuff you need at safety. And, outside corner may be the best spot for him at the end of the day.
Okay, I think that pretty much wraps everything up. We talked about everything in the game, and we addressed everything that people want to talk about, I think. So I think we're going to go and call it there. I think we're going to call that a job well done, unlike the Seahawks on Thursday night.
Yeah, well, it's unfortunate we got to turn over so many tough things, and it's frustrating to talk about, Brendan, because it just does seem like we're a little bit of a repeating tune on every little bit of the different items, but it is kind of the same tune that just keeps repeating on some of these things, which is things that have been problems and long-held problems that have not been fixed and are continuing to be issues. And I don't know where we find fixes for them when I don't see the team looking for fixes with him. And I mean, you mentioned Kobe. It's like you draft Kobe in the 4th round, and he's an outside corner and Walter Thorpe Award winner, and then you move him into the slot last year, and now he's going to be moved to safety, and then maybe he'll be moved from strong safety to free safety next year. And so now is he on his 4th position in 3 years for your team? This doesn't seem like the proper way to, just mold these players and get them to perform at their best at times, and I think back to like Phil Haynes bouncing between left guard and right guard, and Damian Lewis from right guard to left guard, and just the movement of things at times in some of this that just gets frustrating because you don't really know what you have in Kobe Bryant. I agree with you on the Peanut Tillman pinch. He's got an ability to do this, but you don't really know where the guy fits as a player.
Okay, so I mean, obviously this season is going south quickly, but we're not going to stop covering it. I'm still going to do what I do. I know Brandon's going to do what he's going to do, and we're going to link up again in a couple days here to talk about this Niners game. So, Brandon, I want to thank you for coming out and doing the show with me tonight.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate you chopping it up with me on this stuff.
And thank you to everybody who showed up to watch tonight. I will be on Twitch later tonight, finishing up one of my favorite childhood games, the original Max Payne.
Let's go.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you've actually been active on Twitch the last few days.
I have. Yes. You can find me at the Seahawks Nest on Twitch or down in my description link in this video below. I've got it down there, but I've been doing some online streaming here lately. I might do some tonight myself. So.
All right. Very cool. And yeah, 2 days from now, we're going to try to figure out this 49ers game. We're going to hope we do well. We're going to hope we can find something positive, but it's not easy right now. It's not easy, but maybe that makes it even more important that we remember how we wrap these shows up.
That's right.
So I'm going to say it, and it's not going to come with any guarantee of future success. It's not going to come with any guarantee of this season writing itself. But when you're a fan, this is what you sign up for. This happens sometimes, and you go with it, and you know that one day it will be worth it. But go Hawks.
Go Hawks.